I always tell people 3 major principles: reduce sugar and grains, get rid of seed oils. So that's your corn oil, soybean, safflower, cottonseed oil, right? All of those types of things that you find in most processed foods are loaded with these things. And then number 3 is really try to do everything you can to go organic as much as possible, because organic foods are going to have more nutrients and less toxins.
I do know that there are a good number of people who believe that we're getting everything we need from the food that we eat. Is this true? Are we getting everything we need from the food we eat?
Our soil has really lost a lot of this nutritional potential. So our food is just lower in nutrients than it used to be. Now, there are other factors too that can cause people to not be able to absorb nutrients as well. If you're under a lot of stress, or if you eat on the go on a regular basis, that's going to inhibit your ability to produce digestive juices well, stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes. You're not going to be able to absorb nutrients.
Because I get asked this a lot, it's like the number one question. If I had to say the top 5 supplements that a man would require and top 5 supplements that a woman would, because knowing that their needs are different, what would the top 5 be? The guest on today's episode of Take 20 is Dr. Jockers. Dr. Jockers is the doctor of natural medicine and runs one of the most popular natural medicine websites, drjockers.com. The site has more than 1 million visitors every month. Dr. Jockers is also the author of the best-selling books, The Fasting Transformation and The Keto Metabolic Breakthrough. He also runs the popular podcast, Dr. Jockers' Functional Nutrition podcast, that has consistently been ranked among the top podcasts for health and nutrition. And thank you so much, Doctor, for being with us today on Take 20. It means a lot.
Thank you, Samantha. Great to be on with you.
You've been a friend to me without actually even knowing me, because when I started this search and to educate myself in functional medicine, I started researching and I chanced upon your website, drjockers.com. And before that, I was just like anyone else, using a multivitamin, did not know too much about supplements, did not know too much about functional nutrition. And I started following your work closely. I started following and started using your supplements, and some of the supplements have really improved the quality of my life. Seems to be a small world after all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so happy to hear that. And you're right. We can reach each other on opposite sides of the world. I'm here in the United States, you're in India, and we can make an impact on each other's lives. And so it's really an honor to be a part of your health and healing story.
Like you are for many, many people.
Well, thank you.
Before I ask you health-related questions, I would like to know your journey. It's a very unique journey, natural medicine. How did you find this calling?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, growing up, I was an athlete, and my mom was into natural health. My mom was a nurse, and then she became a midwife and a naturopath. And so she was into health. She always grew her own. She would have a big garden. And just like most teenagers, I was into eating a lot of processed foods and bad foods. But she would relay how healthy foods would impact my performance, and also how it would impact my skin. You're a teenager, you don't want to have acne, you want to look good, right? Obviously, you've got self-esteem issues, and I wanted to perform as an athlete. And she spoke into that. She said, when you eat these vegetables, that's going to have more. It's going to help you with more energy. Your skin's going to look better. You're going to be able to play better. And so that was what was incentivizing to me. And I said, I want that. So I would eat whatever it took to perform better, right? And to not have acne all over my face or whatever it was that I was concerned about. And so that was kind of the start of my journey. And then when I got into college, I became a personal trainer. I was always into fitness. I became a personal trainer. And in the personal training world, even though the personal trainers and exercise in general is very healthy, the nutrition element of what most personal trainers are doing is not actually very healthy. And I was eating a lot of what I thought was healthy foods, but they were highly processed foods. And I ended up developing irritable bowel syndrome. And I actually ended up losing about 30 or 40 pounds. And I had a condition called orthostatic hypotension, where I go from sitting to standing and I would feel really, really dizzy because my blood pressure wasn't increasing the way it should. And so in a sense, my nervous system was overwhelmed by stress in my body, and I had leaky
I'm sure
gut
that was very
syndrome.
demoralizing as an athlete.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. But what I realized was I need to make changes. Like whatever I'm doing is not working. And so I started reading books and started talking to other individuals. And I came across a book, and it was called The No Grain Diet. And back then I was eating lots of whole grains. And the American, I know the food pyramid in America, and I don't know how it is in India, but they will have grains and starches right at the bottom. Like here's where you should be getting most of your calories from. And that's what I was doing. I was eating lots of whole grain breads and things like that. And my body just does not do well with that. And so I went on to, I guess, what you would call, like, I don't know if you've heard of the paleo diet. That became very
Yes,
popular.
I've been on the paleo diet. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I went on basically before that had ever been discussed. This is early 2000s, 2004. I more or less went on that. We called it the cellular healing diet. And it was basically fruit, vegetables, healthy meats, grass fed as much as I could, pasture raised animal products, and healthy fats like avocados, extra virgin olive oil. That's pretty much what I was eating. And I felt so much better. I started gaining my weight back. I felt very satiated. I used to have to eat every few hours. My blood sugar was all over the place. And now my blood sugar was very stable. My brain became alive. I actually went to the top. I was at the top of my class in graduate school, and my health and my life was revolutionized. And from there, I was
Are
like, you
you
know what?
still on the paleo diet?
A
Are you still
similar
on the
diet.
paleo?
Yeah. I mean, I follow a very, very similar diet
So
to
it's
that. It's pretty
sustainable
much,
then.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. I really try to stick with a whole food based diet. And it's very rare that I eat grains at all. I eat a lot of high quality proteins. I'm a big advocate of a good high protein diet, high healthy fat diet. So no seed oils. I always tell people three major principles: reduce sugar and grains. That's number one. Number two is get rid of seed oils. So that's your corn oil, soybean, safflower, cottonseed oil, right? All of those types of things that you find in most processed foods. They're loaded with these things. And then number three is really try to do everything you can to go organic as much as possible, because organic foods are going to have more nutrients and less toxins. And when it comes to good nutrition, you want to get the most nutrients, and we're going to talk more about that. You want to get the most nutrients out of the food you're consuming and the least amount of chemicals and toxins. And that's what you're going to find in your organic foods or with your animal products, your grass-fed, pasture-raised, wild-caught animal products. So that's the kind of diet that I follow, and that's the kind of diet that helped me heal. And I also practiced intermittent fasting along with that, which is something we can go into if you'd like. But I wrote a whole book called The Fasting Transformation, talking about how I use that tool. I think nutrition, I look at nutrition as a tool that we can use to help our body heal and function really well. And fasting is a tool as well. And that really helped me heal, revolutionize my health. And then I went on to open up a clinic out here in the United States. And I saw patients for about 12 years, teaching them natural health and nutrition. And then I started creating a lot of online health content. And that's what I do full time now, is create online health content via YouTube, podcast, and my blog.
I'm really glad that I seem to be on the same page with you. So I think 2.5 years ago, I started with the paleo diet, and I've been on the paleo diet ever since. I also practice intermittent fasting. So I'm really glad that I'm following the similar principle, and you are absolutely right. It has played a big part in inflammation. Not just inflammation. I used to have a lot of cravings before this diet. I craved sugar. I had a lot of cravings, but the cravings have disappeared as well. Inflammation has reduced cravings for sure. I'm full. I'm not hungry too often. Even though I'm eating a lot less. Please explain, how is this connected?
Yeah, for sure. Well, when your blood sugar is out of balance, you're going to have a lot more cravings. So when we eat food, we release a hormone called insulin. And insulin is actually an amazing hormone because its job is to take sugar out of the bloodstream and put it into the cells of our body where we can use it for energy. So when we break down basically when we take any sort of carbs other than fiber, we're going to break that down into something called glucose in our bloodstream, and that's a form of sugar. And it's a good form of sugar. We need glucose. Our cells need to use that for energy. However, when we have too much blood sugar, we call that hyperglycemia. The glucose molecules will actually bind to proteins in our blood, and they create sticky proteins. The term for that is advanced glycation end products, AGEs, right? Something that's an AGE, it actually accelerates the aging process. These are highly reactive in our bloodstream, and they create inflammation, and they damage the endothelial lining, the internal lining of the blood vessel, and they can create arterial plaquing and poor oxygenation into the different cells and tissues of our body. So in order to prevent hyperglycemia, insulin comes out to get sugar into the blood. But when we continue to eat higher amounts of carbohydrates, we're producing more and more insulin. And for many individuals, what happens is we produce a good amount of insulin. Insulin drags down the blood, or the blood sugar, right? Blood sugar goes down, and then it gets to a certain point, and then that triggers cravings, right? It triggers, our body says, oh, blood sugar is getting too low. We need to
Crash,
release
like a
stress
crash.
hormones.
Right.
Yeah. And cortisol comes out, and now we get an increase in blood sugar, and then insulin comes out again. And so this causes blood sugar instability, and that's going to lead to cravings, fatigue, irritability. Most of us have experienced a condition called reactive hypoglycemia before. So that's where we eat a meal, right? And for example, when I was growing up, for breakfast, my mom would get me, this is before my mom really understood nutrition the way she does now, she would get Cheerios. I always wanted Fruit Loops or whatever I saw on TV. Of course, she wouldn't get that. She knew that was unhealthy. So she would get Cheerios, which in America, I mean, it's still marketed as a very healthy breakfast cereal. And then back in these days, this is in the 90s when I was growing up, we would get, skim milk. And so she put skim milk in there because she didn't want fat. And then we put a banana on there because banana's fruit, that's good. And then every now and then we'd have orange juice with it, right? And so that meal was very, very high in
But I think it's
carbohydrates.
still that's still the breakfast for a lot of people here as well.
Definitely. It's a very common breakfast. And that's very high carbohydrate and it's quick metabolizing carbohydrates that are going to send a big signal to produce a lot of insulin. So my blood sugar is going to go way up. Insulin's going to come out in a high dose, and then insulin comes out and it pulls that blood sugar down. And then 2 hours later, I would be in school and I would feel exhausted, right? I would want to literally like sleep in my English class, right, in high school. And you'll see a lot of kids will struggle with their concentration, with their behavior, with their ability to perform in school or whatever they're trying to do because they have these blood sugar imbalances. And then when we become an adult, it ends up creating more irritability. We struggle at work. We struggle in relationships. We're more irritable to be around. And a lot of this has to do with blood sugar stability. I always joke around that if we can get everybody's blood sugar stable, we're going to have less domestic violence. We're going to have less abuse in families, right? We're going to have more sustainable marriages, right? Because people are going to be less irritable. They're going to be more
The mood,
enjoyable to be
mood
around.
is
It plays a
consistent.
really big
Yeah,
role.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. I definitely found a big difference in the stability of my moods. I hardly ever have any kind of mood swings or extreme reactions to anything. But I can't help but ask you this because a lot of Indians are vegetarian. And a
Yep.
paleo diet is particularly difficult if you're a vegetarian. So, if you're a vegetarian, could be the next best option?
Yeah, for sure. And so there are a lot of vegetarians out there that want to follow a healthier diet. And some people do really well on a plant-based vegetarian diet. Some don't do quite as well. So you got to just see how you feel, but I would stick with whole foods as much as possible. Stick with whole real foods. I know rice is really big in India, and there's actually a way to prepare rice that makes it lower glycemic. And so I would cook it in, a lot of Indians use ghee, for example. Cook it in ghee or cook it in coconut oil, and that will provide healthy fats with it. And then, of course, make sure that you're combining it with beans so you get your protein. That's super critical. Also, using something like plant-based protein powders. So, in general, I recommend whole foods, but A good high quality, like organic plant-based protein powder, I think especially for a vegan or a vegetarian, would be really, really helpful because protein is your most satiating macronutrient. That means it really creates satiety in your body. So you don't feel hungry. It stabilizes your blood sugar. We need it for muscle protein synthesis, for building lean body tissue. And the more muscle and healthy bone that we have, the better our metabolic rate is going to be, the better we're going to be able to perform in every area of our life, the better our brain functions, the more muscle tissue and bone tissue we have. And so we need that protein. So for somebody that is a vegan, I would recommend doing protein shakes. You can take like coconut milk, berries, and a good quality protein powder and try to make sure you're getting about 30 grams or more of protein in every meal. And that will provide more satiety. When you have your rice, make sure you've got beans in there. That makes a complete protein. You're going to have to eat a lot of that to get 30 grams of protein. So that's where like having some extra protein can be helpful on the side. Or if you're open to eating something like cheese, right, that can be helpful depending on what your dietary standards are. So trying to really try to prioritize protein and then also healthy fats. So stay away from those seed oils and instead use things like extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil. Ghee is a great fat, really
Yeah, I
healthy
don't
for the
think I've
body.
ever heard anyone say cook your rice with ghee or coconut oil because people are so scared of fats. They think that are bad for you and fats are going to make you actually put on weight. So I think that this I'm hearing for the first time, cook your rice in coconut oil or
For
ghee.
sure. For sure. And one thing
Right.
I think that the Indian culture really does well is you guys use herbs really well. And I look at rice as a great carrier for nutrients into the body. So you can get, like, if you make rice, put in curry or turmeric or ginger. Like, I know curry is like a whole blend of like cumin and turmeric. These really powerful anti inflammatory herbs that are really, really good for you. I don't recommend just eating straight white or brown rice. Make sure you're getting a lot of these herbs in there because that's going to actually help stabilize your blood sugar. Another thing you can do is actually put in a little bit of apple cider vinegar in the rice along with like extra virgin olive oil. The apple cider vinegar will bring down the glycemic impact, the impact of how your blood sugar rises when you consume that, and it will actually make it pre-digested. It will actually break it down easier in your digestive tract. And so you'll get the beneficial fiber and prebiotics from the rice without the blood sugar impact. So that's a much better way of doing it and get those herbs in there. So it becomes now a great carrier to get more of these anti-inflammatory herbs into the body. And like I said, cooking it with the ghee or the coconut oil, a lot of people think these fats are bad, but they're actually rich in fat-soluble nutrients. And these fats actually teach your body to burn fat more effectively for fuel. They're going to provide more satiety along with the protein, and they're going to teach you to burn fat more effectively for fuel. And they're rich, particularly ghee is rich in fat-soluble nutrients, vitamin A. There's actually vitamin D in there, vitamin E, vitamin K2, which is really important for calcium metabolism and bone health. So you're getting that in that ghee, and especially if you're on a vegetarian diet, it's harder to get these fat soluble, really high quality fat soluble nutrients. Ghee is going to be a really essential source for somebody that's on a lower animal based diet.
Right. I think that that sums it up really, really well in terms of food and nutrition. I get asked this a lot. What are the supplements that you take? Give us a list of the supplements you take. But I do realize that it's not one size fits all. And I do know that there are a good number of people who believe that we're getting everything we need from the food that we eat. Is this true? Are we getting everything we need from the food we eat?
I wish that was true, and I believe that at one point it was, but there's been a lot of research on this, and it really started in 2004. University of Texas, they did a longitudinal study where they looked at the nutritional potential or the nutritional content of crops in 1950 versus 1999. And they took 43 different garden crops and they found that on average, the nutrients had dropped by 38%. 38% reduction in nutrients. So the spinach that you eat today is significantly lower in nutrients than it was back in 1950 or 75 years ago or whatever it was. And so part of this is because we started using glyphosate and different pesticides and herbicides. And we think we're getting better yield, right? Because there's less weeds, there's less pests that are in there eating the plants. But what happens is it actually kills the soil biodiversity. So our soil is not as healthy and nutrient dense as it used to be. And ultimately, the quality of the plants that we're growing is the nutritional content's only going to be as good as the quality of the soil that it's being grown in. And so our soil has really lost a lot of this nutritional potential. So our food is just lower in nutrients than it used to be. Now, there are other factors too that can cause people to not be able to absorb nutrients as well. If you're under a lot of stress or if you eat on the go on a regular basis, that's going to inhibit your ability to produce digestive juices well, stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes. So you're not going to be able to absorb nutrients.
Really, eating on the go is wrong?
It is. And that's so common, right? And so a lot of people are eating while they're busy working, right? So they're busy, they're doing a
I
lot
eat
of
on the
different
go
things.
all the time.
I'm sure you
Oh
do.
no.
I mean, I
Oh
think our
no.
generation learned. We're close in age, and I think our generation we learned, okay, you got to eat and be productive. You got to eat on the go, and just the idea of fast food or eating fast in general is not conducive with really absorbing nutrients from the food. You see, we have two parts of what we call our autonomic nervous system. That's a part of our nervous system we don't have to think about. We don't have to think about our heart beating, our ability to digest food. We have our sympathetic branch, which is our fight or flight nervous system. That's more for survival. And then we have our parasympathetic part of our nervous system, which has to do with rest, healing, and digestion. And so if we're eating and we're under stress or we're on the go or we're driving or whatever it is, that's activating our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight nervous system. That's actually taking blood flow away from our digestive tract. It's suppressing our ability to produce stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes that we need to digest our meal effectively. So really the best thing we can do when we eat food is take a moment, relax, take a couple deep breaths. In my household, we pray before we eat. And not only is that a great opportunity to give thanks to God and be in a state of gratitude, but it also puts us in that parasympathetic nervous system that now tells the body, I'm in a safe place. I can be calm, relaxed. I can produce the digestive juices I need to really be able to digest my meal effectively, as opposed to being stressed and hurried. And so I think that's really important. If we're not in a good place where we're relaxed, able to produce those digestive juices, we're not going to absorb the nutrients that we need from the food that we have. People that have blood sugar imbalances, if you have those blood sugar swings, that is going to stress your body and deplete more nutrients. You have a higher need for things like magnesium, things like different B vitamins, zinc, because you're depleting them because your body is constantly under stress with these blood sugar imbalances. Stress in general, the more demands on your career, for example, or your family or your relationships, that's going to deplete more nutrients, right? And then on top of that, a lot of people are taking medications. There's a lot of medications like acid blocking medications, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like your ibuprofens and your aspirins and things like that. So any sort of pain medications, steroids, birth control, right? A lot of people taking birth control, and that depletes nutrients. So if you're taking any sort of
By
medication,
nutrients,
really,
you mean the gut microbiome and nutrients as well?
good, really good question. Yeah, I love that follow up because all of these medications are going to alter your gut microbiome, and that plays a big role. But also, it actually takes more nutrients. Your body has to detoxify some of the compounds in these medications, cholesterol medications, blood pressure medications, all of these things. And so it actually takes more nutrients in order for your liver to deactivate and detoxify these compounds. So it puts more stress on your body, and there's a higher need for a lot of key nutrients in order to effectively process the compounds that are coming in from the medications.
And also, apart from this, we're constantly being exposed to toxins, and
Correct.
that is also another beating that the system is taking constantly.
Absolutely. So the stressors on our lives, I mean, thank God for our modern technology. We've got incredible technology today. I'm so happy to be able to be alive in 2024 as opposed to 1,000 years ago, right? But the stressors that our ancestors had 1,000 years ago are different than the stressors we have today. And the stressors we have today call for a greater demand of these key nutrients that we need. And there's a couple key ones we'll talk about that many people are missing. And that's playing a role in their health outcomes and their overall quality of life.
So we need support. And for a while before I knew more about functional nutrition, I was on a multivitamin. And I'm not saying that that was wrong, but most people are on a single multivitamin. And is that enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a great place to start. Depending on people's resources and also just their access to maybe getting lab testing and things like that, I think a good high quality multivitamin is a good place to start. Unfortunately, there's a lot of lower quality brands out there. Most people just don't know what they're really looking for, but a multivitamin is a good
It's
place to start.
overwhelming. I
Yeah,
must
for
say,
sure.
the internet is overwhelming. When you search for something, there are 100 different options available. You don't know which one to select. I remember that Dr. Jockers, your brand of supplements, is third-party tested, and you also manufacture in small batches, which I am told is the gold standard when one is selecting a supplement. Is that the case?
Yeah, for sure. I think I always try to look for professional grade. And what that means, professional or pharmaceutical grade, what that means is third party tested. You want something that's tested by an independent party that makes sure that every batch is pure and that the ingredients are efficacious, meaning that they're actually the effective dose. So if it says 200 milligrams of magnesium in there, there's actually 200 milligrams of magnesium in there, not 40 milligrams, right? And so unfortunately, when they're producing in very large dosages or very large quantities, a lot of times they can mess up these batches. And if there's not a third party actually testing it, like I know with my company that we manufacture through, we've had to throw out a lot of batches because they didn't have what they needed to have in them, right? Which makes it more expensive. And sometimes it's a larger gap of time, but we might be out of stock of a product for a longer period of time,
Right.
which is really frustrating and it's unfortunate. But we want to make sure that what's in there is actually in there. And I think that's if I'm the consumer, that's what I want to know. I want to know, hey, this is what's in there is in there, and I'm not getting additional toxins and chemicals and things like that I don't want contaminated supplements. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things out there on the market that are. So look for professional grade. I'm sure that there's places in India and all over the world that will have that at this point in our society today. Look for professional or pharmaceutical grade. That's always going to be your best bet. And then I think a multivitamin is a good start when it comes to nutrients. There's a couple key deficiencies that we see very commonly in our society. One is magnesium. That's probably the most common deficiency that we see. And magnesium is to the body what oil is to a car. So the more the more stress we're under, the more things we're doing, the more magnesium we need. And we can
Who
get
isn't under
magnesium.
stress? Everyone is under,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolute stress.
You got it. And magnesium is really a calming mineral. So it helps to calm our brain, right? So people that may be dealing with anxiety, irritability, depression, that really helps calm our brain, helps us sleep more effectively. It's really important for cellular energy production, for great mental health, right? So mental health as well as just your ability to think sharply and quickly. So memory, mood, all of those types of things. Muscle spasms, it helps relax the muscles and it calms our body. And so many people are deficient in magnesium, especially the more stress we're under. This is one of the reasons why we feel really tight. And when we're under stress, we're not sleeping well, we're under stress, we're depleting more of this magnesium. So getting a good high
Aren't there
quality
different
magnesium.
kinds of magnesium, doctor?
Yeah,
So which one
definitely.
do I select? Because
Definitely.
aren't there like five different kinds?
There's a lot of different ones. Well, I would say that the most common one that you may see in supplements is called magnesium oxide. And that is a
Right.
poorer form of magnesium. The one benefit of magnesium oxide is if you are constipated, it will help to move your bowels. And that can be really helpful for people that are struggling there. But in general, you want a higher quality form. So magnesium is basically what we call a salt, and it's going to be combined with an amino acid carrier. And so there's a couple good amino acid carriers that really help with magnesium absorption. So magnesium glycinate, so a glycine with the magnesium is a really good one, or magnesium citrate. That's also a very good form of magnesium. There's another one called magnesium L-threonate, which crosses the blood-brain barrier, and I've seen that to be most effective for people, particularly people that struggle with sleep and anxiety. that tends to really work well. And usually something like 100 to 400 milligrams a day is usually a good dose. Some people therapeutically, if you're working with a functional practitioner, they may increase your dose for short periods of time. But the way that you know you're getting too much magnesium is you'll have loose stools.
Loose
If you're
too. Yeah.
supplementing with
I've
it,
been there.
you have loose stools, you got to back off, right? Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, I've been there. I've
Yep.
been there. Which leads me to my follow up question, because I get asked this a lot. It's like the number one question. The top five supplements that I know this is one size does not fit all, but if I had to say the top five supplements that a man would require and top five supplements that a woman would, because knowing that their needs are different, our needs are different. So,
Yeah.
I what would the top five be?
Yeah, and some of them are pretty similar. So magnesium, I would say for both men and women. Zinc is another one. Roughly 25% of our population is deficient in zinc, and the more if you encounter a cold, a fever, flu, we learned a lot about zinc, of course, with COVID. It was really popular. We realized that
Right. I
viruses,
remember.
yeah, we need zinc to help stop viral replication. And zinc is also really important for testosterone production for men, for progesterone production for women. And that's huge. A lot of women are not producing enough progesterone to be fertile. And then also, particularly as women get into perimenopause and menopause, both estrogen and progesterone lower, but progesterone typically they have more trouble producing progesterone. And that can cause a lot of these unwanted perimenopause and menopausal symptoms. So zinc could really help support the progesterone production as well as testosterone. Really important for immune function, really important for brain health, a wide variety of things, skin health, immune balance, helps keep the immune system balanced, thyroid function. So zinc I find to be really important for both men and women. Vitamin D is another really common deficiency we see in our society. Of course, we naturally get vitamin D from the sun, but most of us are spending a lot of time indoors, or we're also in climates oftentimes where we're not close enough to the equator to be able to get enough vitamin D from the sun year round. And so vitamin D supplementation can be really helpful from that perspective. So those would be three big ones that I would recommend across the board for most people. And then for women, depending on like if they're menstruating, if they're in their menstrual cycle, iron can be really helpful. So we see roughly young women, almost 40% of young women are deficient in iron. And I would say probably higher levels in India than in the United States, because there's a higher amount of vegans and vegetarians who are not getting real good bioavailable iron from their diet as well. And when women are menstruating, they're losing a lot of iron there, and you need a certain amount of iron. Now, most men have too much iron. So it's actually the opposite for men. Most men actually have too much iron. So actually getting blood draws helps bring the iron down, and that can be really helpful. But for most women, you're going to need more iron, especially if you are menstruating and you're on a vegan diet. Those would be big risk factors that would say you probably need more iron. Okay, so that's big. Now, if you're eating red meat, that's a good form of iron. So that would be your best iron source, or organ meats too. Like, not that they taste great, but liver, heart, things like that are great sources of iron. There may be a large need for iron with your population base, because I would imagine most of the people listening to you and following you are probably women, and probably younger women. And so iron would be a big one to look at. And one test you can get, obviously you can get a full iron panel, and you can also ask for a serum ferritin. So if you're just getting a complete blood count, they're going to look at your red blood cells, your hemoglobin. And iron is so key for red blood cell and hemoglobin production. And hemoglobin is what brings oxygen. It carries oxygen. You need oxygen to produce energy in all the cells. And so if that's flagged as low, then they're going to say, okay, you're anemic, right? And you definitely need iron. But it might be trending low, but not be flagged. And they'll say, oh, everything looks fine, right? We'll keep an eye
Right,
on it.
right. But you still,
But you're not,
yeah,
but you're struggling, right?
yeah.
And so you can also ask them for a ferritin level as well, which is a storage form of iron. And I like to see that between 50 and 100, somewhere in that range, 50 to 100, maybe up to 150. If it's lower than 50, you probably need a little bit more iron. Okay. And so oftentimes the blood work will look good other than the ferritin, and it will be 12, right? And the person doesn't feel good. And most doctors are going to say, well, everything looks fine. right? But it's not fine. And so that's where it's in a sense, it's before you got the anemia, right? You want to catch it beforehand. You want to be more preventative. And that's when you can address that with the iron. So that's key. And then I would say B12 is also a very common deficiency. And this can be for men and women as well. And B12 is oftentimes a deficiency because number one, we're not getting enough animal products, right? Your plant forms of B12 are not like from mushrooms and things like that. They're not highly absorbable. It's a pseudo form of B12. And so you're really not getting the B12. And so in India, 100 years ago, they didn't have B12 deficiencies, but B12 deficiencies are an epidemic in India now. One of the reasons is because 100 years ago, you grew your own carrots, you grew your own vegetables, and you would actually pull them out of the dirt. And there were soil-based organisms on the plants that you would eat. And that actually was a form of high quality B12. And now everything's refined, cleaned, and we're not getting it directly from the farmer. And so what happens, we're not getting the B12, especially if we're on a vegan-based or a vegetarian-based diet. So you will get B12 if you're eating fish. If you're eating chicken, you'll get some B12, but it may not be a sufficient amount, especially if you don't have good stomach acid or if you're taking some of the medications that I talked about before, any sort of like acid blocking medication or pain medication, steroid, that's all going to deplete vitamin B12. So those would be key ones. And a good high quality multivitamin should have sufficient forms, and taking that regularly can help support those areas. And there may be cases where you need more, right? And of each of those nutrients and more things in general. So, but overall, I would say those would be really good ones to focus on. I mentioned how men tend to not need iron because men don't have menstrual cycles, right? And so most men actually will have too much iron. So I think something like great in Indian culture, you guys use turmeric a lot, right? And you drink herbal teas. Some of these things like turmeric actually helps to reduce iron levels for people that have too much iron, which can be really helpful. And so a lot of times women that are anemic, I will take them off of using turmeric, but men or postmenopausal women that have too much iron will increase the amount of turmeric to help pull some of that excess iron out. And too much iron in the blood. So too little iron, we don't produce enough oxygen, right? We don't get enough oxygen to the cells of our body, right? If we have too little iron, because we don't have the hemoglobin carrier. If we have too much iron, it actually produces oxidative stress. It rusts in our body, creates rusting, and creates inflammation in our system. So it's like a Goldilocks principle. We want just the right amount of iron in our system. So typically with our ferritin, which is our storage form of iron, yep, you'll see that's if you're going to look at one marker outside of just getting a complete blood count where you're looking at your hemoglobin, your hematocrit, red blood cells, that serum ferritin, you want that roughly be between 50 to 150.
100. 50 to 150.
That's right.
Okay.
If it's up over 150, okay, that's a sign, it's a marker of inflammation, actually, right? It's a marker that there's inflammation in the system. It could be too much iron. You can also look at your serum iron. There's a couple different panels that you can look at. We could come back and do a full iron podcast in the future. But a multivitamin would be a great place to start. There are definitely other things that can be extremely beneficial. I know you mentioned a couple supplements that you've taken that have really helped. And those have a high amount of, for example, antioxidants and compounds that help to balance the immune system, right? Things like curcumin, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, resveratrol, which is a compound that, for example, is in things like berries, right? Red wine, they say the French paradox, right? The French are drinking red wine and they seem to be aging well. I don't think it's because of the wine, right? But if it was, the wine has been studied to show that the main beneficial compound is the resveratrol. You're taking supplements that have a lot of these compounds, fat-soluble nutrients, vitamin A, selenium's another one. I mean, we can talk all day about all these different compounds, but I would say the 5 most important to consider would be magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, and your B vitamins in general, and particularly vitamin B12, and then for females, iron.
So it's not like you take a vitamin today and you feel its effects tomorrow. How long would you say? And so people always, they take it for a few weeks and then they don't really see any difference, and they give up. They give up a little too soon. So how long should like one be faithful to the protocol and continue with their medicine, their supplements to see
Yeah.
actual benefits?
Yeah, everybody's different. And there's some there's some nutrients I've seen people have real quick responses to, and others that you really just don't even feel. Okay. And so like magnesium, for example, a lot of people notice right away, they just feel better.
I can tell the difference immediately if I don't have my magnesium with me. My sleep is different, it's completely different from when I take my magnesium at night. My sleep is a lot better.
Yeah, so that's a really big one. Other ones like typically most people don't notice vitamin D right away. Although I will say that I did have a client, this is many years ago, and her vitamin D levels, they were really low. They were like 12, which to optimal levels about 60. And so she was in chronic pain. And I gave her a high dose of vitamin D, and she came back like 2 or 3 days later and she was like, my pain is gone. Right. And so I've seen people have quick reactions like that. But in general, people don't notice that right off the bat with something like vitamin D or zinc or something along those lines. I would recommend taking it for 60 to 90 days and then get retested. So there are tests that you can do. For example, 25 hydroxy vitamin D is a great test that you can ask your doctor to run, right? So if you're getting blood work, right, which I would recommend getting blood work done once or twice a year, at least, if not quarterly, which would probably be more ideal. Like getting your blood work done every 90 days or so would be ideal. But if you're not able to do that, get it done at least once or twice a year. Always make sure you're getting the 25 OH, or that's called 25 hydroxy vitamin D. And you want that to be roughly between 60 and 100. Now, if it's 55, I don't freak out about that, right? But if it's
If it's
32,
100,
it's a good question. There's been no cases that of like vitamin D toxicity that have been reported in the literature. Okay, now to be on the safe side, we don't have a lot of research on what happens in the body long term if your vitamin D is up over 100. So if it is up over 100, let's say it's 150 because you were taking real high amounts of vitamin D, just back off the vitamin D for a bit. I think you'll be totally fine. But you don't want to have it. I wouldn't, at this point, we just don't know enough to have your vitamin D that high for a long period of time. But roughly in that 60 to 100 range, usually you're taking about 1,000 international units per 25 pounds of body weight. So if you weigh 125 pounds, that's 5,000 international units a day. Vitamin D is a fat soluble nutrient. So ideally, you're taking it with meals. It's going to absorb better with meals. So taking something like that, taking 5,000 international units a day is not going to cause vitamin D toxicity, right? It's not going to cause a really high dose. If you're taking 50,000 international units a day, that's going to cause your vitamin D to be really high. And in some cases, that can be important. Like if somebody is really deficient, to do that for, let's say, 30 days or 60 days, take a real high dose to get it up. But typically taking a maintenance dose, 5,000, or for a larger person, 10,000 international units a day, totally safe, totally fine, and very, very healthy and beneficial for the individual. So that's typically what you're looking at with vitamin D.
I've also
Zinc,
noticed some people say they feel better anxiety wise as well when they're on a vitamin D supplement.
definitely. Vitamin D plays a big role with brain health, immune health, hormonal health, your overall level of inflammation. So vitamin D plays a role in all of that. Your risk of developing an autoimmune disease is up substantially if you're vitamin D deficient. If you're vitamin D sufficient, your risk of getting a autoimmune disease or even cancer is significantly lower, right? A lot of research coming out. Vitamin D is one of the most well-studied nutrients. There's so much research out there on vitamin D and different types of chronic diseases. And so if you just go to Google and type in vitamin D and cancer, right? You'll find so many different articles about it. So it's definitely something you want to consider, you want to look at. Now, ideally, we're getting it from the sun. So if you're able to get out, get regular sun exposure, really good sun exposure, that's great. Now, you need to get, in order to really absorb vitamin D from the sun, it can't just be your face. You need to get roughly about 40% of
On
your
the
body. So
right.
yeah. So I don't know the temperature range where you're at, but like it's
It's
summer
really
here.
hot.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys probably, if you wear less clothing, right, or spend time outside in your backyard or whatever it is, or at the pool, right? Like my daughter, we have a local pool, and so we're at the pool a lot. My sons will run around without a shirt on around here. And so they're getting, I don't supplement their vitamin D, and particularly in the summertime, because I know that we're in the sun a lot. We really love to be in the sun. And so my whole family, we get in the sun as much as we can out here to absorb it. But also the darker your skin, right? So the darker your skin, the more sun you need, because you have more melanin that's blocking vitamin D absorption. The darker your skin, that means that your ancestors were getting lots of sun exposure, right? And sun exposure, just like we talked about with iron, it's a Goldilocks zone. Too much sun causes burning, right, on our skin, which we know. And so there's a protection, that's darkening of the skin, that helps protect against that. And so the darker your skin, the more sun exposure you need in order to get enough. And this is why, for example, African Americans have even higher rates of vitamin D deficiency than Caucasians. Okay. And I would say Indians would probably be somewhere in the middle, because you guys have darker skin. You need a little bit more sun.
A lot of us are deficient in vitamin
Yeah.
D. That's for sure. And also, I think we are a little because yeah, and also we don't love the sun so much. I don't think any of us like to tan.
Right. Right. True.
If you see Indians anywhere, they will be with an umbrella. so I don't think we are getting enough sun. Actually, I'm pretty sure we aren't getting enough sun.
So that's definitely one we want to address. Vitamin D. Zinc is another big one, like I was talking about earlier. And zinc is super key. I would typically recommend an additional 10 to 25 milligrams of zinc. Now, getting 10 to 25 milligrams is going to depend. Like if you feel like you get frequent illness, if you get sick, like somebody has a cold, you get it, right? You're like, oh, why am I always the one that's getting the cold? Adding in a little bit extra zinc, like 25 milligrams a day, and taking that with a meal as well, can be really, really helpful there. So I think that's really supportive and really beneficial. If you have an autoimmune disease, right? Zinc can be really beneficial. If you have had acid reflux a lot, right? And maybe you've taken heartburn type medications, that depletes your zinc. So taking a little extra zinc there can be really beneficial in those cases. If you're having menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms, then that can also be beneficial. Or acne, even individuals with a lot of acne has been shown to be, for many people, a zinc deficiency. And so there's a number of reasons why you might want to take a little bit more, like 25 milligrams. I don't recommend taking more than that unless it's short term. If you're like if you have a cold or you develop COVID or a flu, then you can do something like 100 milligrams spread out throughout the day for 3 days or so to help you kick it quicker. But in general, stay around that 10 to 25 range.
So
Yeah.
say, look, I add to cart this bunch of supplements, and I'm ready to go, and I take my supplements really carefully, and I ignore the rest, right? I'm like, I still have this stress, everyday stress, crazy stress. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm working extra. I'm eating food on the go. Does the supplements even work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always say your health outcomes are going to be roughly 90% your lifestyle, and supplements will be the extra 10%, right? And in some cases, for some individuals, it might be weighted a little stronger, like if you're very vitamin D deficient or very magnesium deficient. But in general, it's the lifestyle that's the key. That's the foundation. So keeping your stress under control, really prioritizing restorative sleep and a good circadian rhythm is incredibly important. Good nutrient-dense diet, good positive relationships, good self-talk, right? Things that you're saying to yourself. Oh, all so critical. Regular exercise and movement, very, very important, right? And so these are the things that we want to prioritize. That's the foundation. Supplements are not going to rescue you from a bad lifestyle, right? And so supplements are just there to help optimize your overall health along with the foundation of a healthy lifestyle.
I like to ask this of my guests, especially someone who has been in functional nutrition, who has such a wide experience of health. What does your daily routine look like so that me and my listeners of this podcast could adopt from the way you live and your routine, things that could help us improve our quality of life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I do is I wake up, and I'm usually an early riser. I wake up 6:30, somewhere in that range, and then I will oil pull in the morning. So I take a little bit of coconut oil, put it in my mouth, and I'll swish that around, and I go outside in my front yard, and I will go out with my bare feet, and I will get on grass, So I'm fortunate enough, I've got a front lawn, get on grass, and I
Will
stretch and
concrete
I
do
pray.
as well?
Concrete will work, yeah. So you can get on concrete as well. Absolutely. And what happens is that there's a healthy electromagnetic frequency that comes from the earth that all of our ancestors were used to because all of our ancestors have been attuned to that electromagnetic frequency. Whereas cell phones, computers, all these kinds of things, these are all new electromagnetic frequencies that are a new stressor on our body. And so I go out, I get barefoot on my grass, I stretch, I pray, I walk, and I'm switching that coconut oil for about 10 minutes or so, and then I spit it out. We have so much bacteria and bacterial toxins in our mouth. This is why when you wake up in the morning, for example, you have bad breath, right?
You
Like
have
all of
bad
us have
breath.
morning breath, right? And that's a product of these endotoxins that are released from the bacteria. And so the coconut oil really helps grab up those toxins really effectively so they don't get into our digestive tract or further into our system and eliminates them effectively. And so it's called oil pulling, and I do it for about 10 minutes in the morning. You don't even need much, maybe a teaspoon or half a teaspoon, and you'll just feel it in your mouth. And I use that time to pray. I use that time I walk around my front yard, right? And I ground my body. And that grounding to me is like showering my electromagnetic field. So nature has a very harmonizing electromagnetic frequency. In fact, in Japan, they have all these really busy professionals in Japan. And Japan has a really interesting healthcare system. They spend a lot less money on healthcare than, for example, the United States and a lot of other westernized countries. And they're hardworking, high stress individuals. One of the things they recommend is they will have these busy businessmen, overwhelmed individuals, they'll put them out in the forest, right, for a week. And they'll say, okay, you got to go out, take a long walk in the forest. They basically go camping more or less, and they're around nature. They call it forest bathing. And they found that when they do this, when people are doing this regularly, their need for medications goes down, their longevity goes up, their quality of life goes up, their productivity goes up. And so the reason for that would be nature has this healthy electromagnetic frequency that's harmonizing and calming for our body and helps our body to go through healing and repair processes, right? Also, there's essential oils that come out of plants, right? That when we're exposed to those, when we're around trees that are releasing these essential oils, those essential oils have been studied to be very, very beneficial for our overall health, for helping calm our nervous system, for helping support our immune system, right? A lot of great benefits there. So you can do it as well, right? Just try to get out in nature whenever you can. For me, I'm able to do it in the morning. So that works out really well. And then I come in, I hydrate my body really well. I try to drink a lot of really, really good filtered water. And I also will drink herbal tea. And really like good warm beverages in the morning. Warm beverages are also very good for your vagus nerve, that parasympathetic branch of your nervous system, which helps calm
Does
my
coffee
body.
count?
Coffee does count, yeah. Coffee
Okay.
is great. I'm a big advocate of coffee as well.
Oh, really?
I've
Yay.
Yeah, I think coffee can be really beneficial. Now, there's some people that obviously have sensitivities to coffee, and for some individuals, they really have to be careful of their caffeine amount, right? Because it can overwhelm their system and cause too much stress. But in general, if you're getting the right amount, coffee is really good. It's a bitter herb. Bitter is good for your liver, right? So all your bitters, whether it's parsley, cilantro, milk thistle, arugula, right? Coffee is one of those that's really good for liver detoxification. And so I will drink herbal tea in the morning when I get up, but then usually after about an hour, hour and a half after I wake up, then I'm drinking some coffee, okay? The reason why I like to space it out like that is because when we first wake up in the morning, we have this natural cortisol awakening response. Cortisol is a stress hormone that's actually an amazing hormone. It helps give us wakefulness. If we are drinking coffee right away in the morning, like so many people do, coffee also stimulates cortisol. But we can actually teach our body not to produce enough cortisol when we first wake up and create, in a sense, a poor pattern of cortisol production. So usually you're going to get a nice rise of cortisol if you wake up and you get moving, right? Just get out, get outside, get moving, move around, and you'll notice you have wakefulness. And then wait about an hour, hour and a half, and research has shown that your cortisol starts to lower. And that's when it's a good time to bring in the caffeine to give you more performance benefit, right? To give you better mental clarity, memory, things like that. And so usually taking it right around that period of time, an hour, hour and a half after you wake up, you're going to get a better overall response, more long lasting response too, to
Yeah,
get
I
you
drink
going.
coffee 90 minutes after I wake up, and
Perfect.
that's, yeah,
That's the way I
and
teach it. You
stop.
must have. That's the way
Yeah,
I
that's
teach
the
it.
way you teach
That's
it.
right. So you're doing it
Right.
great. Yeah.
I don't think I've missed even one. I do the apple cider vinegar. I do
Yep.
the oil pulling, the grounding, the sunlight. So I'm a good student, I must say.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. And I will just to kind of shorten this up. I always try to make sure that I'm getting movement in. I'm exercising it most days. I like to lift weights,
What's
so
your
I will.
favorite form? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I was just
lifting
going to
weights
ask you
for
what's your
me.
favorite form of exercise?
I really I'm fortunate enough to have a home gym here at my house, and I really enjoy lifting weights. I lift weights usually 6 days a week, and then I try to walk a lot too. And so walking is so healthy and therapeutic. And I try to get I don't count my steps, but I try to walk 3 to 5 miles a day. You can get like step trackers too, where you're getting 5 to 10,000 steps a day. That is really good. That's really what our ancestors were doing. And it's so healing and therapeutic. It's great for your circulatory system, your lymphatic system, your neurotransmitters in your brain for better mood. I mean, walking, if you actually look at the research, walking outperforms antidepressant medications in studies on depression. Now, that doesn't mean that every single individual, all they have to do is walk and their depression goes away, but it shows you that for a good percentage of individuals, just getting more good activity can be really beneficial for supporting healthy mood. And many times these medications are prescribed in situations where just healthy lifestyle would dramatically improve these individuals' health. And so getting out walking is so key. If you can lift weights or do some sort of resistance training, even if it's body weight, push-ups, pull-ups, things like that, I would recommend doing that 3, 4 days a week. Squats are a great exercise, even if it's air squats. Doing that resistance training is going to really help you build muscle. And the more lean body tissue, muscle and bone tissue you have, the better your metabolic rate and the better your overall functionality is going to be. And especially as people age, one of the big risk factors for developing disease and dying early is what we call sarcopenia, or the loss of muscle
Of
mass.
muscle. Yeah.
Most people are not moving enough as they get older. And so it's so
Especially
critical.
women as well.
Yep,
I- Yeah,
absolutely.
more women
Yep.
should start like doing strength training.
Definitely. I recommend strength training across the board. It's just so powerful as far as a therapeutic activity that you can do. So I try to work out every day. I try to get sunshine, sun exposure every day. And at night, this is really important for good circadian rhythm. We put our kids to bed. We have 4 young kids, so we'll put them to bed 8:30, somewhere around there, 8:39, and we make sure the lights are off or dimmed in our house, right? We have very little lighting on. We do have some, right? And then we put on blue light blocking glasses. So if we're still going to be on our phone or a device or any sort of light, we have these blue light blocking glasses, which are basically orange colored glasses. And they're becoming more and more available. And these help block blue light. And blue light is what you get, for example, from the sun in the middle of the day or from all of our lights. I've got lights set up here. These are blue lights. Blue lights tell your brain it's daytime, which is fine right now. Like for me, it's 9 a.m., right? So that's great. But at 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m., I don't want blue lights in my face, right? So our ancestors would have been exposed to candles or to fire, which is more of a red light. And so the blue light blocking glasses make everything look a little bit more orange and red. And they take out the blue light, and that orange and red light doesn't suppress your melatonin production. Melatonin is your sleep hormone. And melatonin is one of the most powerful antioxidants that your body produces. And so it's really important for helping the mitochondria to function and heal. And a lot of people are having issues with, for example, with weight loss resistance or autoimmunity, chronic inflammation, because they're not producing enough melatonin at night because they're being exposed to these blue lights. And so the blue light blocking glasses and dimming the lights in my house allow my brain to produce the melatonin that I need so I can get really great sleep. And then when I go to bed, they say every hour of sleep you get before midnight is equivalent to 3 hours of the regenerative capacity of the sleep after midnight. And the reason for this is because your body starts producing human growth hormone, and HGH, human growth hormone, is your quintessential anti-aging hormone. And so you want to produce a really good amount of that. That helps you burn fat. It helps preserve lean body tissue, muscle, and bone. And it's very supportive for balancing the immune system. So I try, if I can, to be in bed at 10. It's usually more like 11, but I try to get at least an hour of good quality sleep before midnight, if possible. And I always feel so much better. Last night I went to bed at like 10, 10:30, somewhere in that range. Felt great waking up this morning. Felt so much better. And so I had more growth hormone release. So I think that's really key. And I make sure my room is as dark as possible. I've got an eye mask on to block out any sort of ambient light. You want your room to be roughly 65 to 68 degrees. If you can control the temperature in there, that's going to help you sleep better. I like a fan, overhead fan on for sleeping as well. And I think those things are really important. Really prioritizing great sleep is so key. And nowadays there's little things like I have a ring. It's called the Aura Ring that you can buy that you got it. There you go. That tracks your sleep. So it gives you feedback. So one thing that I've seen, like for example, for forever, I've always been kind of I guess you could say a driver male, right? So I'm a man, I'm a high performer, I'm driving hard, right? And for many years, I did not sleep well, right? And it would affect me, but I could just push through it. But what I found was that in my 30s, I felt like it was really starting to catch up with me. And I found that I actually was a mouth breather. So I was breathing through my mouth at night. And it wasn't until I got married that I understood this, because my wife said, "You're snoring." And I'm like, really? Right? And so I started doing mouth taping, where I would take tape and put it on my mouth at night. And it forced me to breathe out of my nose. And then during the day, I would just try to focus on taking deep breaths through my nose, right? And I retrained my nervous system to be a nasal breather. And when you breathe through your nose, it's calming on your body and your brain. You also get a lot more oxygen up into your brain. It's better for your oral health, and you're going to get deeper, more high quality sleep. So a lot of people are mouth breathing, and you can fix that with just there's certain types of tapes, right? You don't want duct tape. That's going to hurt pulling off, right? But they're actually
next
mouth
thing you know,
taping.
everyone people
Yeah,
are
if you
using
go
duct
on
tape.
Google, or I don't know how you guys shop, Amazon or whatever it is, and you just so that you can get a nasal strip, or they even have like little magnets that will help open up the nasal cavity, especially if you feel like you're congested a lot. That can really help open up your nasal cavity so you can get more oxygenation in there. But nasal breathing is so key. And really just the way that we breathe in general plays a huge role in our overall health. Most people are very short, shallow breathers throughout the day. And that's creating a stress response in their body. We actually want to be nasal breathers and breathe and have a longer respiration cycle. And that's more calming on our brain and our body. And so sometimes when people have anxiety, mood problems, things like that, just taking a moment and think about how you're breathing and your posture can make an impact. And slowing down your breathing and really focusing on breathing through your nose, oftentimes people notice that their mood improves, they're less irritable, that they're able to concentrate better. So some simple little things like that can make a world of difference. Yeah, so those are some of the things in my lifestyle. I also do the intermittent fasting like you were talking about. For me, I typically fast until usually around 1 or 2 o'clock. That just seems to work well for me. I drink coffee, I drink herbal teas and things like that. But for me, it works well to fast till 1 or 2 o'clock.
When do you eat your last meal?
Yeah, usually I'm eating my last meal roughly. I'm usually done with it by about 7 o'clock or so. Okay. And I'm usually eating I'm usually eating 2 to 3 meals in that period of time. Now, everybody's different. Okay. And I will say, like, Samantha, for your body type, because you're still having a menstrual cycle, and you're thin, you're lean, right? And so for menstruating females, there's actually a way to go about intermittent fasting that's different than men. Men, it's a little easier, right? For women, I recommend the week before your menstrual cycle that you don't do intense intermittent fasting, right? So let's say if you're normally doing like a 16-8, is that what you typically like to do? Like a
Yes,
16-hour fast? Yeah.
but sometimes 14 as well.
Great.
Like when I'm,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's great. So by a 16-8, we mean a 16-hour overnight fast and then eating your meals in like an 8-hour eating window. So let's say from 10 a.m. to 6 or something. So for you, when you start your menstrual cycle, that's a good time to fast. You don't need as much hormones. It's a good time to bring inflammation down. It's a good time to do the 16-8 or tighten it up even more if you felt
During my
good with it.
menstrual cycle, is
During
it?
your menstrual cycle.
Oh,
The
okay.
week before your menstrual cycle, and most women will say this intuitively, they have more cravings the week
Yeah.
before they start menstruating. And that's because you need more progesterone during that period of time. And fasting is a stressor on the body. Now, it's a healthy stressor. It's a stressor that our ancestors encountered and adapted to. So it's a healthy stressor on our body. We call it a hormetic stressor. It's a stressor that makes us more resilient. But the week before you menstruate, you actually need more calories during that period of time. Okay. And a larger eating window. So that would be a time where you might want to eat in a 12 or 10 to 12 hour eating window. Okay.
So the week before the
The
menstrual
week
cycle.
before,
Okay.
exactly. And then if you're for any women that are trying to be fertile, we call this feast famine cycling. So we're teaching the body at certain times we're in a feasting period, and at certain times we're in a famine, and there's benefits to both. We just don't want to be in both phases too long, right? We want to cycle between them. And so for anybody that's looking to menstruate as well, you also want to have a feasting period or a larger eating window with more calories right around ovulation. So roughly, like, ovulation would be day 14 typically for a typical menstrual cycle. So roughly day 12 to 14 or 15, you have more carbohydrates, right? A larger eating window, right? And then the best days to fast would be from the start of your menstrual cycle till, let's say, day
Day
12,
13.
right? Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So
Yep,
max the your strictest fasting would be first day of menstrual cycle to day 12.
that's right.
Then it's feast time,
Yep, yep,
a
exactly.
shorter fasting window,
That's right.
and okay, okay.
Yep. And
So that
then
is from
roughly
day
day
that is from
16. Yep. And then roughly day 16 to day 21 or so, you can go back to doing a tighter eating window, and more of a fasting type lifestyle. And then that week before your cycle, day 21, you go back to feasting. Does that make
right.
sense?
Yes, makes sense. Makes
Yep.
sense.
Yep.
Writing it down.
Great. Great. We covered a
Right.
lot here.
We covered a lot. Thank you so much. This has been a very, very interesting episode, and thank you for so much information. I don't think that anyone can miss even a line because you'll be missing out on something very informative. Thank you so much, Doctor, for this episode.
Absolutely. It was my honor, Samantha.
For those of you who asked me about supplements, this was a very informative episode on the supplements you should be taking, shouldn't be taking, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you enjoy this content.